Catus Maximus here, this time with a review of the Duralast Indexable Flex Head Quick Release Ratchet. This is made by Gearwrench, and just a few weeks ago I made a review about the 100-tooth Duralast. This Master Mechanic is a 72-tooth, which I think is just fine. Otherwise, they're essentially identical ratchets, except for the Duralast has a slightly different switch. All made by Gearwrench, who also makes Husky. I think the reason Gearwrench is now the OEM for so many of these companies like True Value and Home Depot, True Value, Master Mechanic, Home Depot, Husky, AutoZone, Duralast, is they're just offering these ratchets for super cheap. The Duralast and the Master Mechanic are made in China, where the actual Gearwrench brand is made in Taiwan. Gearwrench also seems to be reserving the super high count 120-tooth versions for their own brand, and they distinctify their brand by having this bevel on the top edge, where those bevels don't exist on the other ones, and of course a slightly different switch on the actual Gearwrench. But these are all Gearwrenches. I am almost 100% positive that I could take the parts from any one of these three ratchets and interchange them with each other, except for obviously I couldn't take the quick release components and put them into the non-quick release ratchets. Otherwise, very same as the Duralast. Oddly enough, the Duralast 100-tooth has really pretty strong springs in it and has quite a bit of back drag, where even the 120 XP Gearwrench is pretty light on the back drag, and the 72-tooth Master Mechanic's pretty light on the back drag. Now, I've done reviews on both of these. These are known as walking pawl or split pawl or twin pawl ratchet, twin pawl, I guess, cam style ratchets. You have a little cam, it gets bound up, and it's like a wedge. And what they have is they have two of them. So like on this 100-tooth, what there is there's actually 50 teeth on the gear. And then as you're ratcheting, you have these two pawls which are slightly offset, and they just kind of walk back and forth, kind of each pawl providing essentially a half step, and that's how they double the teeth. So this would have a 50-tooth anvil in it. This would have a 60-tooth anvil, same thing, rocking pawls or walking pawls. What I did find interesting on the Master Mechanic, we'll pop it open. Two things I found interesting. One is they actually did plenty of greasing in this unit. Now, I should mention, and some people have talked about in the comments, and I actually found a couple photos, is the one annoying thing about Gearwrench ratchets is the fact that they have a very thin bottom plate, which in most situations isn't such a big deal, except for I found some photos where people have had these beating around toolboxes, or maybe they're trying to tap in a bolt or something like that, and obviously a ratchet's not a hammer, but they would impact this bottom plate here, and because it's so thin that if you dent it, what it ends up doing is pressing against the pawl and will actually make the ratchet not even work. And I didn't think about that, but that's one of the annoying things about these thin plates, is the fact that, I mean, particularly if it's beating around a tool bag or a toolbox, that this plate can get dented, bind against the pawl, and essentially ruin the ratchet till you pull out the plate and hammer out the dent. Now, I didn't grease this. This thing was actually, surprisingly enough, new in the package, and this is from 2017, and there's actually plenty of grease in there. I'm really pretty surprised about it. And the 72-tooth, not the easiest to see, but it is only a single pawl. Each click, as we can see, the entire pawl seats. So in my opinion, I actually think the 72-tooth is just a slight bit stronger, just because with the walking pawls, each pawl is only half thickness. There's a lot of YouTube tests that have shown that even the half thickness pawls are actually pretty darn strong. But nonetheless, I like the idea of having just a single full width pawl, kind of like this design here. And we pull out the anvil, and you can see it's just one single pawl. And I just like the general idea. 72 teeth is more than enough teeth. And I just like the idea of having all that extra surface area in there. And I'm surprised that they had plenty of grease. And so, to tell you the truth, if you like quick release ratchets of this Gearwrench style, I would probably go with the Master Mechanic, certainly over the Duralast, just because The duralast was dry, and I don't know if that's just because it's a more recent, like 2020 unit, and they just started foregoing the greasing the ratchets. But if nothing else, just by having a single pawl, really low back drag, and as far as the quick release, it's pretty flush, so you're not going to accidentally hit that. And it has actually a pretty stout spring. I'm really pretty surprised about that. As far as quick release ratchets are concerned, really do like this strong spring in there. It really holds onto the sockets very well. They are not falling off, unless you want them to fall off, of course, like so. Another little feature I was noticing about this is it's pretty subtle, but if we look, they've actually put a little indentation. I don't know the right word, but what they've done is they've stamped the end of this fastener here, causes the end of the fastener to expand a little bit to reduce the likelihood that it's going to unscrew itself. Where on the duralast they didn't, so it's almost like the master mechanic was just had a slightly different specification. It's exactly the same fastener, same handle and everything, except for this just happens to have, the master mechanic happens to have the extra little bump in there to help, once again, prevent the fastener from coming loose. Maybe they determined it wasn't such a big deal on these duralasts, and so they stopped doing that. But I like the idea of it. Otherwise, there's just a slight difference. They knurled the handle on the duralast, where it just has a smooth undercut on the master mechanic. Almost kind of like the handle on the master mechanic better. As far as the strength of the indexing, the detent, I would have to say that they're basically the same. And of course, having the indexable flex head just prevents it does two things. One, normal flex heads over time can get loose, and so you have to do things like really crank down on the fastener or add little shim washers that you cut out of feeler gauges to tighten them up. So when you have a ball detent like this, it tends to last a lot longer and just obviously won't get loose. And the second thing is it holds it in particular positions, so when you're trying to get it into a particular space, it just stays at the angle that you set it at. Anyway, not a lot else to say besides I've only done one master mechanic ratchet, which was the non-flex version of this a couple years ago, and decided it was probably time to update do another little update video, and this time with a slightly different version, the flex head, and also because I have the ability to compare it against its other remakes, such as the duralast, and then of course the actual gear wrench, which once again appears to be restricting the 120 tooth designs for the actual gear wrench brand. The other thing I was noticing is the gear wrench branded ones are a little bit nicer. If we take a closer look at the anvil on the gear wrench branded one, we can see the clear machining marks. The anvil looks like a really nicely machined part on this. Where we take a look at these kind of Chinese remake ones, trying to get all these together here. There's the gear wrench. You can see these are forged, and I'm sure they're pretty strong anvils, but they aren't machined. They're just forged in that particular into the anvil, and that is that, kind of like a socket. So the actual gear wrench brand ones there are using just a slightly more expensive and more premium manufacturing process, because obviously they're machining the anvils on the gear wrench ones, where they're just doing simple forging, where you kind of get this odd, kind of rounded finish. And the deal with having these types of forged anvils is it's cheaper, and as they're forging the anvils, the dies wear, so the anvil sizing isn't going to be quite as precision as having everyone machined once again. Anyway, really appreciate everybody who's been watching. See you next time.